So this site is set up, and we'll be doing some light vulnerability scans. I'll be walking you through the automated process that attackers use to target WordPress sites, and I'll be showing you how to manually do those same checks so that you can understand and appreciate that someone doesn't have to be a hacker to identify certain vulnerabilities, or to discover and to test your site and to find things. It's not just the people who have specialized tools, but just anyone with a browser and the technical knowledge of how to interrogate a site can do it. Clear? Any questions so far?
Welcome again, everyone, to our March 2021 WordPress meetup. This evening, we're focusing on security. It has been one of the topics on our list to present on, and I think it was advertised for the last two meetings, but we ended up spending a lot of the time on the other topics. And so we're finally getting to security this week. We were supposed to have O'Shane, but he's been held up. And so today we'll be spending most of our time with Gavin. Gavin is an international cybersecurity consultant. He was born right here in Jamaica. He did not go to university, but at the moment he has several certifications that I cannot begin to list out. Gavin has been doing a lot of work, not only as a professional in cybersecurity and building his name, but also he has been doing a lot of work in the community to help other persons who want to get started in security to understand how they can also move from a stage to expert stage. Someone's mic is muted. It's open. Okay, thank you. Yes, so he has been doing a lot of work. He has started, his company is G5 Cybersecurity Limited. That's limited, right? And he has also started the G5 Cybersecurity Foundation. Underneath the foundation, there's also the Caribbean Cybersecurity and Privacy Association, of which he is the community leader. And so if you haven't seen him as yet, that is an active group that is helping students and professionals to get into security and understand different areas, access mentorship and resources. There is also a Discord group for the Caribbean CSPA, and I will allow Gavin to share more about that with you. So today we're going to be looking at WordPress security, how we can improve the security of WordPress applications, and just the state of web security at the moment. So I'm going to turn over to Gavin now. Let's give you
my
hand.
Reactions, right?
Thanks, Latifa. I didn't submit a bio, so I was very surprised, just hearing Latifa talk about because I didn't submit a bio for this WordPress meetup. So yeah, it was interesting. Some of those things, you're reading all these lists of things, and some of them started so small, and it's amazing just to see where they are now. Like the group, the Discord group called CCST, Caribbean Cyber Support Team, right? In 2019, we started it, and that was a WhatsApp group with 7 persons. And someone said, hey, why don't you put it on Discord? That time I didn't know what Discord was. I've never used Discord because I don't do gaming. I don't do gaming anymore, probably since high school. We moved it over and started to tell people, and then advertise it, a bit of social media ads, and boom, now we're at about 600 persons, Caribbean persons. So they started small, really, really small. All right, so for today, right, I'll be going into WordPress security, helping you to understand it from the offensive side and also the defensive side. So I won't have I don't have a presentation to show, because I wanted to do this live to bring you through and show you, how you can also go through the process We'll do a bit of Google searches. We'll use the web, so that it's not a case where you're just looking at slides and it's hypothetical. I'm going to be showing you everything live. So for most persons here, I believe that you have a general idea of what WordPress is, what's its purpose, and you're more interested in how to secure it so your WordPress site doesn't get hacked. All right, now, so that's my approach to it today. So generally, before I jump in, does anyone have any specific areas of WordPress security that you've always just been curious about, and you don't want me to miss that, or you definitely want me to touch on that today? Any kind of special requests?
Well, I think maybe what would be good for maybe a lot of bloggers, I don't know if any bloggers are in the room, but maybe a checklist of what to look out for, when you're building a website or when you have a website, what are some of the things that you should, the checklist for security when you're building any website? Yeah.
All right. So any website, not just WordPress. Okay. So
WordPress website. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Cool. So yeah, so we can touch on that. So I've set up a demo site. I'm going to share my screen. I've set up a demo site just for this, and I'll be kind of walking you through, helping you to understand what it's like. So I'm going to share my screen now. All right, so I've set up this demo site, right? I have a managed WordPress plan with GoDaddy for about 5 blogs that I host, and so I've created this. So it's a temporary site, and you can kind of follow along on your side if you want on this same site, because after this session then I'll tear it down. So this demo site is set up. Now for WordPress, what most of you might already know is that WordPress uses themes, it uses plugins, there's the WordPress core, and then all of that causes WordPress to function. So you put it online, either you pay for hosting online, or you have your own environment set up and you are doing that yourself. So you either pay for hosting or you host it yourself. But in essence, WordPress is made up of really 3 things: plugins, themes, and the core, which makes it function. Any questions so far? All right, so the process, right? So for what I do as a pen tester, and also for people who hack, right? There's a certain process that we go through. For the people who are just freelance hackers online, they might not document their process, but they do go through the same process as a pen test. So there's a phase of information gathering, and that includes what's called reconnaissance and enumeration. Typically, there are a bit of military terms, but basically just gathering information on a website before you decide to launch an attack. So that means understanding what it is, how it works, what are the different entry points, and then from there you start to go into scanning the site. Some WordPress sites are a part of a large scan that is done generally. So what happens sometimes is that a new vulnerability comes out for WordPress, right? And over time, what attackers do is they get a list of all domains. So you can get a complete list of every website that's registered on .com or .org, and all of these different zones. They're called zones, TLD, top level domains. But there's something called a zone file where you can literally get a dump of every domain. So as they are registered each day, they get a fresh list of those domains, and they do just a general scan of everything on that domain to identify which are WordPress. Then they keep that list. So now when a vulnerability comes out, something in the news about, this specific plugin, they just scan all of those WordPress sites. And then based on the ones which are using those plugins, then they target them. So that's just one approach. The general approach, though, which we also use for pen testing, is information gathering, vulnerability scanning, exploitation, and then there's the reporting phase. But hackers don't need to report to anyone; they just exploit, and then that's the end of their process. So I'm going to walk you through information gathering. So let's say you have your WordPress website now, right? Someone comes across your site. I'm seeing something in the chat.
Yeah, I just put the.
Oh, sorry, I'm not. Okay.
In.
Yeah, so someone comes across your WordPress website. I'm logged into this, but let me just open a new tab, incognito window, and go to it. So someone comes across your website. This is what they see. It's just a blah theme. And what's happening now, at least from my perspective as a pen tester, I want to understand how this site works. Maybe right now I don't know that it's WordPress as yet, other than the name WordPress now, but let's say it's just some website. Now, information gathering, it's about understanding your target. So first, what I'll likely do, if I'm not using any type of special tools, just my computer and my browser now, I'll go into, sorry, I think I need to share my entire screen so you see. Yeah, are you seeing it now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I was sharing a browser window a little earlier, so now I'm sharing my entire screen. So, let's close. So this is the site. Now I go to a site, and I don't know what exactly the site is using, what it's running, etc. I can easily just press Ctrl U to show the HTML source code, and then based on how CMSs work, they try to brand themselves, right? So for example, for this site, yeah, you'll see the heading title, which you can change, but WordPress has certain characteristics in its source code which tell you that this is a WordPress site. Now we can scroll down or to just search for WordPress, and you'll see a few things. You will also have common things like certain paths being called WP something, right? And this is where the plugins are. So this tells you a lot that, well, this is WordPress, and it also tells you some of the plugins that are active. So without using any fancy tools or anything like that, we can start to go through and build a list of the plugins which are running on this site. Here we can see that CoBlocks is installed. Let's see what else. Google Analytics. We can see that the theme here is 2020. And you can go through and see a bit more. We can see some JavaScripts here and 2020. So you can pick up a lot from just looking at the source code. In many cases, you can also identify users, etc. But we'll I'm just walking you through the process of gathering info on this site. So we know that the site is running WordPress. We know that the site is running WordPress. We also want to get as much info as we can about plugins, themes. Here we can see that there is a plugin here that's running, Yoast, and the version is version 15, 15.9.2. There are also sometimes meta tags. So sometimes there are also meta tags which tell you the version of WordPress. So here we see that the WordPress generator here, it's telling you the version number. And these things aren't really necessary for you or at least for your site to work. So it's fluff. And what happens in the end is that the fluff helps attackers to know more about your site so that they can plan and strategize what they will attack. Right, so that's just the general thing. So we're at the phase now, we're gathering info. We now know which plugins are installed. We know which theme is installed. We know that the platform is WordPress. Now we want to gather a little bit more to understand the infrastructure that it's running on. So, where is it hosting? What type of server it is? So what we're going to do now, just right click on the page, click inspect, and it will give you this window. Then we go to network. and simply refresh the page. So when we refresh, what we have now is that your browser is showing you all of the files which are loaded on the page, right? And now we want to look at security headers. So every web server sends response headers. It's a part of how the web works. So what we're going to do is we're clicking on the link for the website, and then we're looking here under headers, and we're looking at response headers. So we want to look at what the web server is telling us, and every web server is different depending on how it is configured, but we want to look at this. Oftentimes this will have common things like the type of server that it's running. Here we see OpenResty. We also can tell if someone has set certain security headers. You will see things like this is set, XSS protection. There are other sets of security headers that can be there, such as X-frames. So this is just a part of the overall information gathering. So now we know the type of server that it's running on, right? We know the themes, we know a bit about the theme, the different plugins which are there, and you can just have that in a list, or someone who is planning to attack your site, they will have that in a list. Now, as someone who is running a site, oftentimes, or at least just for people who own websites, one of the things that I find common is that they think that a lot of this info is private. They think that it's something that isn't really out there, that if someone knows this, it means that they hacked them to find out, right? And this is just to show you that it's all over your web pages. Your authors and sometimes even the usernames to log into your website, sometimes it's in the source code of your web page, right? So I'll go through that soon, but now we've just gathered a bunch of info and we understand what the target is and how to target them. We know that the WordPress version is X. So what often happens next is whenever versions are disclosed, the attackers, they now Google those versions to see, is there some type of exploit available? So let's just do that as an example to say Yoast is running. So let's just Google for Yoast plugin exploit. So here we see a bunch of results. Usually they would put the specific version. So let's just look back for the Yoast version to see if there is any vulnerability for that one. Okay, so this is Yoast version 15. So we're not going to hack anything, right? I'm just bringing you through the process so you can see how other people will be out there gathering info on your WordPress site and strategizing how to target it. So we put that in. We're looking for those specific vulnerabilities. Here you can see a bunch of things. Here it's talking about stored XSS, cross-site scripting, and as you go through the results, you will run into different websites that will provide you with exploits. Now this is one specific site that is very popular for exploits for multiple things on the web. Exploit DB. So we're going to click on that site, and this is just to give you an idea that all of this is free. So if you don't take the responsibility to protect your site, people are getting the advantage on you for free. They don't really have to do much but just do a Google search. So this is for 1.7. It's not for our specific version, but this is a website dedicated to sharing exploits. A lot of it is this is a legitimate site. It's not some shady website either. It's a legitimate part of the IT security community. So as you see, this site is filled with exploits. If I go to the exploit page, you'll see that there are exploits being published every day for multiple things. And we can search in here for WordPress. and you'll see that a whole bunch of things will come up. Right now, this says there are 43,000 entries in the database relating to WordPress, and these are all different plugins. So when these things are discovered, eventually someone creates an exploit for it. It often ends up at somewhere like here, right? And then websites get exploited. It's just a quick example. I'll pause here. Do you have any questions?
Are the vulnerabilities just for themes or for plugins or themes as well?
Everything, anything that's related to WordPress, anything that's discovered where an exploit is available. Yes, everything. So the theme, the plugins, the WordPress core, yeah. And as I said, we haven't done a vulnerability scan of the WordPress site as yet, right? This is just from just looking at the source code, picking up the little quick things that we can find, and doing a Google search to see, okay, I know that the site is using this. Is this thing vulnerable? So we haven't even used any special tools like Kali Linux or such, which I'll show you shortly, but we haven't done anything like that. So this is just the information gathering phase. So right now, we don't know of any vulnerability for the things that we've picked up from the casual browsing and looking at the HTML source code. Well, not yet. So let's move into a vulnerability scan. So I'm going to show you what that looks like in Kali. And eventually I'll go into showing you some security plugins, some settings that you can add to your WordPress site to secure it. I use iThemes Pro, and I use also iSync to keep all of the plugins up to date. WordPress now has a native auto update thing built in, but I use iThemes to do part of the security, and I also use Cloudflare. Sucuri is also good, but I'll get into that shortly. All right, so let's go to my Kali setup. So for those of you who are not familiar, Kali, what you're looking at now is Kali Linux, or at least the screen to log into Kali Linux. So let's just go. We're using the default thing that comes with Kali. This is a demo. This is just a demo instance. So Kali Linux is an operating system that's dedicated to penetration testing. A lot of hackers use it, but it was primarily developed to support pen testers. And so it's complete hacking OS. Anyone ever heard of, is there anyone here who has never heard of Kali Linux before? All right, so I guess everyone is good. All right, so here's what we're going to do now. We know that this WordPress site is there. We don't want to spend a whole bunch of time manually going through it. So we're going to just use Kali Linux to do a quick scan. So inside Kali, there's a tool called WP Scan, which is short for WordPress Scan, which is very, very popular. Kali Linux is free, by the way, so you can always download it. I'm running it in a virtual machine here, as you can see. So it's something you can do on your own PC, just to play around and get familiar with some of these things. So, hold on. All right, so we're running Kali, and what we're going to do is WP scan, and we're going to tell this tool to scan the WordPress site, the demo site that I've set up. All right, so we're going to say --URL. This is kind of how it accepts its commands. All right, then we're going to tell it to, let me just copy paste. Let me just copy paste from the scan I did before, just to be quick. So what you're looking at here, we're calling the tool, we're entering the URL, we're telling it to choose a random user agent. So whenever you visit a website, your browser, it will take maybe like a minute in total to be complete. or maybe 2 minutes. But I'll walk you through some of the results, and then I'll show you how to manually find those same results that the tool is going to show you shortly. In the meantime, any questions? Any questions about here and what's happening? Questions, anyone? Questions? Feel free to ask.
What's the scope of this scan?
So, all right, what exactly do you mean by the scope of the scan?
Is it going through the entire website to find all the vulnerable points? Is it that it has a list that it's checking again, that's updated daily?
Not quite. It's going through a lot of the common security vulnerabilities for WordPress, and also the scan that's being run now, it's running in a slightly limited capacity, and I'll show you here. It will take maybe like a minute in total to be complete, or maybe 2 minutes. But I'll walk you through some of the results, and then I'll show you how to manually find those same results that the tool is going to show you shortly. In the meantime, any questions? Any questions about here and what's happening? Questions, anyone? Questions? Feel free to ask.
What's the scope of this scan?
So, all right, what exactly do you mean by the scope of the scan?
Is it going through the entire website to find all the vulnerable points? Is it that it has a list that it's checking again, that's updated daily?
Not quite. It's going through a lot of the common security vulnerabilities for WordPress, and also the scan that's being run now, it's running in a slightly limited capacity, and I'll show you here where you see no WP Vuln API token given. So there's a site called WP Vuln, which is a database also for WordPress vulnerabilities, and you can tell this tool, you can give this tool an API, the key, right, to do a more detailed scan of all plugins and everything on the site. So this scan is checking for like the low-hanging fruits, the very common things which are known for WordPress. So let's start at the top. So here it's talking about some of the headers, the security headers that we just looked at earlier. It's just telling you what those headers are. It's checking for the robot.txt file. A lot of times this file, which is used for SEO purposes, it often has sometimes people put things in it like WP admin, or if they rename the path to their admin page, they will put it there because they don't want the search engine to crawl that page. So sometimes they try to hide the page, right? They use a plugin to hide the login page, like give it a special URL, but then they put it in the robots.txt file because they don't want search engines to find it, and they kind of assume that people don't check this. So that's just one of the things. So if there was anything in this file, it would have been listed here. Here it's going through some additional things like some plugins, some parts of WordPress core. It's telling you the WordPress version, which I showed you earlier how you can just look in the source code to find it. Here it's telling you where you can find that version info. So you can go to feeds, you can go to comments/feeds, and it's also just in the main source code, the home page. Here it's saying that the theme couldn't be detected. We know what the theme is. It's 2020, I believe, but for some reason it didn't detect the theme. Here it's trying to identify users. So, and I'll talk to you about this right now. So right here, it identifies that a user for the site is WP demo. Right, and it's showing you some of the different ways how it confirmed that this is a valid user for the site. So it's showing you, the RSS generator, the Yoast author sitemap, author ID brute forcing. Now, this is a very common issue where when you set up a WordPress site, let me switch to the WordPress site and show you. Oftentimes when people set up a WordPress site, they create the new account, that first admin, or they create additional admin accounts, but they don't complete the profile and select an alternate name to display on the site. So when you post the different blog posts, it's showing that the author is the username that you signed up with. And I'm going to scroll down now and show you. So the username for this website is WP demo. If you notice, the first name field is empty, last name field is empty, nickname is WP demo. So all of this by default, people just set up this and they start working on their sites and they publish. And they don't, a lot of times they don't come back here to really update anything. So the only thing that WordPress knows is the actual username that you use to sign in. So now the internet knows that this is your username. All right. Now I'm going to show you an example. So if we fill out this and we say Amy Bob, right? And here where it says display nickname publicly as, we will now have additional options so that on the blog post itself and in the source code, it will display, something other than the actual username that is used to sign into the website. But for now, it will just be WP demo. So I'm going to go to the WordPress website now, and I'm going to show you what it looks like to manually identify those users. So on your WordPress site, anyone can just go enter your WordPress site name / and author, question mark author equal 1. And this is a standard thing, for a standard feature for WordPress, for you to be able to cycle through the authors by number, right? So it's not something special, it's a normal legitimate feature. But while it's a useful feature, just for whatever purpose, it can also be used against you. So if we do that, you will see that it redirects to the author, which has the place of number 1 in the database, which would be the person who set up the site, and that would be an administrator. If we do the same thing for number 2, you won't have any results because there's only 1 user in the database now. So if we do this, page not found. So one of the things we can take from this is the only user that's in the site. We could continue and cycle through 3, 4, 5, and even use a tool to do that. But this is just to give you an example of how attackers help to narrow down a valid user that's on your site, and then from there to try and guess your passwords or other things. All right, so this is the author. Now we just identified a valid user, which means that now we can set up an automated attack to use a list of potential passwords to try to log into your website. So that's just one approach. Now here in your blogs, right, it's also possible to identify who the user is by just looking for author. Every WordPress site is different, so some of them might not show the author's name on the front end, but oftentimes it is in the source code. So here you will see that it shows the author's username, author / and it shows their name. And in most cases, when the username is lowercase and has no space in it, it is usually an actual username to log in, and not a name that they selected in the admin area. Cool. Any questions on this? Any questions? All right, so covered. All right, so just to slow things down and recap, we did a little bit of information gathering to understand the WordPress site, understand what is being hosted on, the versions, the plugins which are running, etc. We could identify a user, and you can do this with your own WordPress site now if you have one, right? And to go through and understand. Now, a lot of these little issues, there are a lot more things that you can do, and I'm going to show you from the plugin perspective why I use iThemes. So people are going to attack your sites. All right, so let me share from tablet now to just give you a little bit more illustration to see if I can drive the point home. All right, so I'm going to join now. So I'm in the waiting room. Okay, perfect.
Just a second, Gavin. If you use the query, does it always show up the username?
If you updated the user profile with the first name, last name, and you set it to display as to be something other than the username, then it will show what you set the display as.
Okay.
So they won't actually know what the real username is, as long as you use something different for the first name, last name.
Yeah. Because I just tested one of my sites and I'm still seeing the username even though the displayed as is different.
No, it shouldn't show the username, but you can block it. So you can block the query from being used. You can do that with htaccess or with a plugin. All right, so I'm sharing my little whiteboard. So I want to kind of just show you what the process is like. So
hi, I'm Jordan from the Jamaican Developers Group. This video is a part of our meet and greet series. If you like what we are doing or this video, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to not miss any further updates. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave it below or contact us on our community forum at community.jamaicans.dev. See you soon.
So you have you're sitting at your computer or an attacker. So let's say, So let's say this is, sorry everyone. So let's say this is hacker. What? Sorry. So let's say this is hacker, right? He is sitting at home or she's sitting at home. They go out to the internet. All right. So this is the internet. They go out to the internet. They go to your WordPress website. Your WordPress website uses plugins. Your WordPress website uses plugins. It uses themes, and then there's the core. Now, this is just the standard setup. Right, you might have like iThemes, you might have WordFence, you might have Security, like Security plugin, and but what happens is that each time they try to attack your site, it's going directly to your WordPress site. There's nothing that's really stopping it, other than you're hoping your plugins will work, whatever security plugins you have. Now, how it should be, or at least from a security perspective, what you want is to have a web firewall. So right here, this is where you want to have a web firewall. So you have firewall. This can be things like, right now there's Sucuri, which is very popular. There's Cloudflare, and I'll do a Google search soon to show you. So what happens now when you have all of these things, right? When you have the firewall there, what it does is it absorbs all of the work, or all of the bad traffic that you are getting before it goes to your site. So the firewall takes the traffic that's coming from the attacker over the internet. It looks at that traffic and decides, is this traffic safe? And then it passes it on to your website. Then your website responds with whatever the query is that they wanted, sends it back to the firewall. The firewall also checks it again to see if everything is safe, that it's not some type of malicious code, and then it sends it back to the person. And that can be normal users. So the big benefit for web firewalls, if you're not familiar with them, is that they take the hit before traffic gets to your website. They screen all of that traffic and then pass it on. Some of the benefits with that, especially for web firewalls like Cloudflare, is that they have their own CDN, content delivery network. So they pull a copy of your website, keep all of those files, and then each time someone is visiting your site, instead of going to your site and making 100 requests for the same content, they deal with the requests there. So let's just clear this. So what happens now is there's user. So what happens is there's the user, there's the CDN, there's your website, right? Now, each time the user wants something, it goes there, the CDN responds. There's no request that is going to your website because it has a copy of that file. Now, only when there's some type of new request for content, then the CDN goes, pulls a single copy and stores it. It goes back and they keep it. So this cuts down not just attacks, but the load on your server in general for your WordPress site. Fortunately for Cloudflare, they have both the web firewall and the CDN built in, and some others might, but I can't really talk from Cloudflare because I use it. So it's really, really good to have a web firewall. It saves you a whole lot of work, and it does a lot more than any plugin on your site can do, because in order for your plugin to work, it has to receive the traffic. And this is what the firewall prevents. The firewall prevents the traffic from reaching your website in the first place, which is dangerous. So get a web firewall for your WordPress site. That's the takeaway from that there. Clear? Any questions about web firewalls, Cloudflare and Sucuri and how those work?
There's one question in the chat. What are your thoughts on the capabilities of the WordFence firewall?
So WordFence is okay. It has some benefits, like you can tell it to block anyone that's making a certain number of requests per second, like, to throttle them. So it has some good functionality, but you can't depend on it alone, because if your WordFence is getting the request directly to handle, then it means that the attack already reached your website. But in general, it's a good security plugin to have. But I prefer iThemes because it gives me more flexibility, and I'm going to show you the iTheme setup at least for iThemes Pro. But in general, it's a good plugin. It does have some benefits for WordPress sites. All right, so let me share the backend now of the WordPress site. So here we're looking at iThemes. Now this is in the settings section of iThemes. Right, so this is the iThemes plugin, ITheme Security, and this is the Pro version. They The free version offers some good options, but there are some additional things that I recommend which are only available from the pro version. And you might be able to do these with multiple plugins, but the benefit I see with iThemes versus trying to use a lot of different plugins is that you can now cut down the number of plugins running on your website which might be vulnerable, which need to be updated. So instead of having 6 different plugins which might be able to do this, you now just have one. So these are just some options, right? They have the security check, where you can enable that to do some basic security checks. You have global settings where you can configure your lockout messages. How soon should it lock out someone who is trying to guess a password or to enter a password, how long it should lock them out for, the look back period, so how long iThemes should check if this person was locked out before, or this IP address was locked out before. You can add a list of IPs that you believe are safe, especially if you use a VPN and have a dedicated IP, something like that. So it gives you just a lot of options, right? Now, scrolling down, we have, this is something that is really useful to me. The 404 detection. So when people are scanning for vulnerable sites on the web, they do just broad scans. They don't really care about your specific website because they're scanning a bunch of sites at the same time. Now, because they are probing and trying to find something, they end up hitting a lot of files which don't exist. And this part of the plugin, it detects if someone or an IP address has tried to connect to a specific amount of files which don't exist, and then it blocks them because it sees that as suspicious. Why are you creating 10 different requests for files that don't exist? If you're visiting the normal site, then you would have just been clicking on normal links which would take you somewhere. So if you're hitting 20 different files which don't exist, it's likely that you're probing for something, so this blocks you. All right, so this is an example, and here are the settings to say, error threshold. I have mine for my website, I have it set to 5, but to be safe, you can have yours set to 10 or 15, because a normal person shouldn't be clicking on 15 links that take them to nowhere. So, I have mine set to 5, but 10 should be good for your site if you just want to ensure that you're not locking out a legitimate person who is just persistent and and clicking on the same things that takes them to nowhere. Banned users, this is just a setting where you can see users which are banned, and you can enable your own banned list. You can even enable something from Hack Repair, where they have a list of so-called bad IPs. File change detection. When your site is hacked, usually attackers change some type of file on your website. Sometimes they add some PHP files which start to redirect people who visit your site. So what this does is it sends you a notification whenever a file on your site changes. So this can be a good way to learn from early that something suspicious is happening with your site. Some of the updates, some of the notifications that you might get will be for like when your plugin gets updated. But otherwise, if you're checking these frequently enough, if something suspicious happened, you can usually see the red flag from the notifications that you get, because you'll see that a certain type of PHP file was added into a directory. It might have a certain type of name, so it lists the different changes that were made, and then from there you can go through and check. Local brute force detection. This is just where it's checking if someone is trying to guess usernames and passwords, and they have like a global network that they use to say, IPs that they know which fall that they've gathered from their own intelligence. They add it into this, and you benefit from it. Password requirements. This is very important. lots of things here are important, right? But password requirements. Some of you might have guest users who log into your website. So you might be the admin, but you have a bunch of other people who might sign in to add posts, etc. You can force them to use a password length, a certain password length, right? So you can say, all right, strong passwords, enabled, user group, and you select the different user groups. So, people who are authors, contributors. For all of my sites, I think maybe only one of them really has an external person, but everyone else is just a single G5 account. But all users are forced to have passwords of a certain length, all user profiles. So in here, we'll say, all right, apply this to all user groups, and they need to have strong passwords. Down here, you can say refuse compromised passwords. There's something called Have I Been Pawned? That's another service which notifies you if your password if your email address was included in a data breach. So that's something for you to check out. Let me just drop this in the chat, because this should be useful for a lot of you. Everyone should be using it. I think I'm not seeing the chat because never mind. All right, I'm not seeing the chat right now, I guess because I'm sharing.
I've posted.
Okay, yeah, so Have I Been Pawned is good for you to sign up. So you can force users to use strong passwords, to log into your site. So that's one feature there. SSL, you don't need to enable this, at least for like GoDaddy's managed WordPress. Maybe if you're doing your own hosting, sure, but you need to have an SSL certificate. So this forces your site to load over HTTPS. System tweaks. Let's look into here. I have all of these ticked, right? So these are just some additional security things. So you can say protect system files. So this will protect things like the README, etc., the README, readme.txt, WP config. Most of these things that you're checking here, it is automatically creating an htaccess rule, right? And if you're not familiar with htaccess, it's a configuration file that's used to control your web server. So you can use htaccess to create redirects. You can use it to set security headers. You can use it to do a whole bunch of things, to do caching. So how to access your htaccess now, you can use FTP to connect to your WordPress site. And if you're not familiar with that, it is something that you can always easily Google to say, how do I connect to my WordPress site with FTP? Or how do I update my htaccess file? And you'd usually get some guides which say, okay, first connect to FTP. But to connect to FTP, you need your username and password, your FTP username and password. And it will kind of walk you through the process, even if you don't know all of those things now. So as we tick these, we want to disable this. We want to filter request methods. We want to filter suspicious query strings. A lot of these things, as you read them, they're a little bit self-explanatory, and you're going to say, yeah, that sounds like I want to block that. Yeah, it sounds like I want to disable that. Yeah. So, and if you don't know, as you're going through these and checking them, you can just Google to say, should I block PHP in uploads? And just do a Google search, and it will kind of give you an explanation that, yes, this is a good thing because A, B, C. Now, continuing to go through, I'll skip over some of these things. Again, this is just another set of things that you can enable to just add a bit of security. All right. But I want to get to the really fun stuff now. So, two-factor authentication. Now, you likely log into your WordPress website with just your username and password. For my sites, and my general recommendation is that you should enable two-factor authentication on your site. You can do this with some other plugin. You don't have to use iThemes, but again, I recommend iThemes because it just has everything in one place, and I can just go through, enable, and use all of them. Now, when you do this, you can say, okay, for everyone that's going to log into the website, in addition to their password, they need to provide an additional code to get in. And that can be using like an authentication app like Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, or it can be that the person gets a code sent to their email. Each time they enter the username and password, they get a unique 6-digit code, and they have to enter that after they enter their password. So I'm going to show you what that sort of looks like. So here we're saying all authentication methods, it's set by default. We're saying 2-factor. Who do we want to enable this for? We're going to select all user profiles because you want everyone logging in, even the people who are just guest posters. You want to have a certain level of security, right? So enabling it for all of them. Scrolling down just so you see what is there. Boom, boom, boom. And we're going to say save. So inside my user account now, because we've enabled that option, the next time I try to log into this website, it will ask me to set up 2-factor, right? But if you scroll down, what you will now see are these options, 2-factor authentication options, and it will ask me to set these up. So I can choose to either set up the app, scanning the barcode here, it will generate a code, then you enter the code to verify, and the process is set up. So it's very easy. Or I can enable email authentication, and then each time I enter a username and password, it will send a code to my email, and then I have to enter that code, and that code expires after about 30 seconds. So that's that's a bit of the primary benefit with this 2-factor thing. You get this unique code that expires after a short period of time, and you use that to log in addition to your password. So if someone knows Yara's password, right, they still need to have this code that changes every 30 seconds to be able to get in. Right, so that's just an additional thing to help you understand that the benefit of why it's good to use that. It might sound like it's some additional work, but the benefit of the additional security that you get, I think it outweighs that little extra effort to do it. All right, so we just touched on that. The other thing that I really like is the hide backend feature. I think a lot of persons here might be familiar with this. Is there anyone who isn't aware of what this is, the hide backend feature? Anyone? Alicia, are you familiar with this? All right, Dwayne, your hand is raised. Yeah, go ahead.
No. I was just putting up my hand to say I'm not familiar with it.
Okay. All right, cool. So normally when you're going to log into WordPress, I'm going to disable it and show you. So here. So to get into WordPress, to find the login area, right, you can just go wp-admin, and it will redirect you to the login page, which is wp-login.php. I don't know why it's taking so long. All right, so that's hidden. Yeah, so we're at the login page, right? And this is the standard login page for WordPress. So everyone knows that in order to log into a WordPress website, this is where you go, wp-login.php, right? And that takes you to the login page. Now, all of these different things, right, that we're doing, they are all a part of just minimizing the likelihood that someone will compromise the WordPress site. As you see, there are multiple different things that we're disabling and shutting down and blocking, and it's all to contribute to just minimizing the risk someone will break in. If you put it to a real world scenario for your home or your car, let's say for your car, there are a few things that we do to protect our cars from not being stolen. One, we lock the doors when we are stepping away from it, out of view and that type of thing. Sometimes we put an alarm on the car just to, if someone tries to break in, that it sends off a notification, it makes a sound. We might do other things like we only park in certain areas. You don't park in dark, isolated places because you want to overall minimize the risk that your car might be broken into or stolen. And it's the same type of thing with websites. We have all of these different things that we can disable and enable and all of that. And we do these multiple things to just minimize the risk that someone will break in. We enable multi-factor authentication. We keep our plugins up to date. We keep our themes up to date. We keep the WordPress core up to date. We use a web firewall. We enable some of those additional features from iThemes or from WordFence. And we do a whole bunch of these different things. And collectively, what they do is minimize the risk of something bad happening. All right, so yeah.
I think
So,
Dwayne had a
yeah.
question. Dwayne Williams had a question. He had his hand up.
Oh yeah, he just told me why, that he was just signaling that he doesn't know
Okay.
what the purpose of it is. All right, so this is
One more
where
question.
yeah, go
One more
ahead.
question from the chat. Can .ht access be bypassed?
So in terms of if you create your HT access rules, can someone simply ignore it and do what they want? That's really what you're asking, right?
I think so. Chin?
So it's yes, but not quite. So HT access is there to tell the server how to behave, right? Now, from the outside, someone can't just decide not to or tell your site just not to use it unless your site is compromised in some other way, because this is the whole purpose of why the HT access is there. So if your website is compromised and they're able to modify your HT access rules, or they're able to control your site, then they can tell it to ignore. But in general, no, it's not a case where someone just says, like some fancy rule like ignore HT access and do this. So no, it would have to be as a result of your site already being compromised from something else. So create your HT access rules, add your security rules inside that, add all of your additional rules, but you still need to protect the site so that someone doesn't get to your HT access file and make changes to it. All right, so we just I disabled the backend option, right, to hide the backend. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to enable it and show you the difference. So this is our new login URL, super duper private. So what we're going to do, we're going to save that. So as you see, it just told us that it's enabled, settings saved, and it shows you that this is now the new URL. All right, so if we go to the old site now and we try to reload, you notice now it is saying page not found. So it no longer, what it's doing now, the login page is practically no longer available at that URL unless we use the specific URL that we just created, which is /super duper private. So you can think of it as like a password for your login to get to your login page. That's how you can think of it in a simple way. So if we do this, you'll see that it now redirects us to the login page, but you would have to know this specific path. And the big benefit of this is that for people out there who may have identified a username on your site, or who just wants to try and guess a username, you are making it that much harder for them to find the login page in the first place to be able to log in. Clear? Any questions about this? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm saying that I'm clear, and that's a feature that I was thinking about for some time now. So I'm really happy that you touched on it.
Cool. Deborah K. I
With
see your
the
hand raised.
yeah, with putting that new or changing the login page, because I know of plugins that can do the same thing. But in say you use iThemes or even any other plugin to change the URL login page, with the information gathering and scanning that you showed us and the inspect tools, even if you change the URL for the login page, would that URL or that
Be
new quote
disclosed.
unquote username be disclosed on in the inspect tools?
So for the reputable, sensible WordPress plugins, they don't disclose that. They don't disclose that in the source code of the site. So no one would know it unless they are guessing the directories. So short answer is no, it's not disclosed, but it's important that you treat this URL almost like a password so that it's difficult for someone to guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can take like a long list of words, like a dictionary, and run it through the website in an automated way. So you can do things like this. You can automate this process. So you can say test, then we change this to something else. We change this to Deborah, and we try that. Then we change it to K, and we continue doing that, but using software to automate that entire process. So you have to ensure that whatever path you choose, that it's not something that someone is likely to just guess or have in some automated list or like from a dictionary, right? So you can put it to, you can do something like, if it's, let's say it's your site, you can just have like a keyword to say, my car is super dope. Something like that. So that it's hard for someone to guess. So they won't get to your username, to your login page in the first place. And then if you're following a lot of the recommendations of applying the different security controls, what it will look like is that what the process will look like for someone who's trying to attack you is that they might get to your WordPress login page, but then they will now have to deal with multi-factor authentication. They will have to be able to guess something. They might decide, okay, they're going to try and hack your site in another way, but then you'll now have your web firewall that's blocking certain types of traffic. Also, to touch on the point of the web firewall before we move on from here, for you to understand some of the benefits, we know that WordPress sites can often get hacked because there was a plugin that's outdated or that has a vulnerability. Web firewalls have a feature called virtual patching. So let me show you what that sort of looks like. So let me probably just use a clean one to not clutter. So let's say someone is using some malicious code, and the code likely looks like this. Let's say the code looks like this, right? Boom. So let's say the code looks like this. When this is being entered, so let's say the code looks like this, you have a vulnerable plugin and someone is using this. What happens now is that your web firewall, no matter what the plugin is, no matter how huge that vulnerability is, your web firewall is consistently blocking this from being processed in your site because it is known to be malicious. So when a vulnerability comes out and it uses certain, in order to exploit it, it uses certain types of characters and certain types of code which are known to be related to malicious activities, your web firewall blocks it. So although your plugin is outdated and you don't even know that it's vulnerable, your web firewall is actively working to patch or to block certain vulnerabilities even before you know about it or you've had a chance to update your plugin or to fix whatever the issue is. So that's another very, very important thing about using web firewalls. They help to block vulnerabilities before they can get to your site, and because they are consistently updating their database of known malicious web content, or just or requests, you're actively being protected even when you don't know about something. Right? Because by nature it's blocking things which are just naturally known to be dangerous. Clear? Any questions about that and the role of firewalls?
I think Machine had a question. I'm not sure if he still has his hands up.
Okay.
Yeah,
A
go ahead.
statement and a question. So firstly, based on the question that was previously asked by Deborah, as Gavin mentioned, treat it like a very secretive password, that URL for the secret login. Because if, for example, you want to put it on your site somewhere else, like for example, you put it somewhere in the about page, footer, or so forth, a website crawler can easily scan the entire site for links and then pick up that secret link that you created. So that link is not supposed to be used anywhere on the site. It's supposed to be kept aside in your head or somewhere, because once it's basically on the site, listed somewhere on a web page, a web crawler will find it. The question that I wanted to ask, and this go towards a bit technical, I don't know if you know or not, what do you think they did to change the URL for the login? Is it that they inject some code in the HT access, or is it definitely from the WP redirect queue? What do you think they use to block the?
From what I've seen so far, it's not in the HT access. It's something that it's a change that they make within the PHP of WordPress core.
Okay.
So, or at least the plugin itself has its own PHP that it's using to do the function, and then they tie that now back to the WordPress core. So WordPress says this is where the path is, and this is how you get to it. And what the plugin does is it takes over now and says, before you get to this path, go through us, and then we take you to that path. So that's so that's what it does so far. That's what I've seen. It's not in the HT access file.
Okay.
Well, here's the question, no, Gavin, right? Right now, you're showing us a plugin that is doing all of this protection.
Yeah.
In the event somebody doesn't update that plugin, I'm assuming it will be outdated.
Yeah.
So you have an outdated plugin, security plugin, with this login link. Is it now a vulnerable plugin?
So it is, but it is, and that's why it's important to have a web firewall, right? So although it is vulnerable, it doesn't mean that it is definitely going to be hacked. It just means that the risk is higher. Now, when it's outdated, and for whatever reason you probably don't update your site frequently, or you don't have any type of auto updater thing enabled, that's where the web firewall comes in to protect you. So in order for it to be exploited, someone usually has to send some type of request which it looks dangerous, right? It has to be usually formed in a certain way where the request itself just has some strings and some content which is known to be dangerous, and that's where the web firewall comes in to block that. So it doesn't even get to your WordPress site in the first place to try and exploit the plugin. So it's not a case where the plugin gets it and then you're hoping that iThemes or something else will block it. It is blocked before it even goes to your WordPress site. So to the person who is attacking your site, they are just seeing your URL, right? It's not like they're going to a first URL and then your WordPress site, because for the web firewalls to be enabled, the name servers are changed. So inside your GoDaddy site, you would have to update the name servers in the domain settings, and point it to the name servers that the Web Firewall service gives you. For example, with Cloudflare, it's something like edna.cloudflare.com, something like that, or edna.ns.cloudflare.com. So for every request that goes to your site, the DNS, the thing that's controlling, that's telling the internet where your website is going to be Cloudflare or Sucuri or whichever thing. So it's actually going through Cloudflare's network first before Cloudflare sends it to your actual hosting provider. So that is how they get to screen the traffic and decide, is the traffic safe that's coming from this person or not? And if it's not safe, then to block them and give them some type of error page, or sometimes you can choose if it's a CAPTCHA. And I can show you what that looks like shortly. I can show you what that looks like shortly. But that's how it really works, behind the scenes, so that people are still seeing your site, but a firewall is actually there sitting in front of your website.
So for someone who doesn't really know all of this, how will they know when their website is compromised?
So there are usually some red flags, right? So there are some red flags, but the red flags are not always consistent. So not everyone will see the same signs. So some WordPress websites, when they're hacked, what they do is they redirect some users. So like maybe say some of them have things like every 3 users, it redirects them to this spam page. And then it allows another person to see the normal site. It doesn't do anything. So what will happen is you will have some users who might contact the website owner and say, hey, I tried to visit your website, but it redirected me to this other site. And then that would be a red flag, because the person is going to say, oh no, it's not supposed to do that. What's the link? And then they take a screenshot or something. But redirecting, users reporting that your website is redirecting them somewhere else, is usually a sign that the site has been hacked. And it's usually a plugin. 9 out of 10 times, it's a plugin that was compromised, and not the core and not the theme, but a plugin. So it's very important to know which plugins you're using, to do some little check on it to ensure that it's reputable. Inside the WordPress directory, it's important to check if they actually update it frequently. So plugins which haven't been updated in years, those are red flags, right? Because it means that whatever vulnerability has been discovered, since the last update, it is likely that it hasn't been patched, or no update has been put out for it. So let me just show you what that looks like. So here we're going to go to the area to add a plugin, and I'm just going to see if there are any like really old items. Let me see. Let me call this plugin
series. If you like what we are doing or this video, please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to not miss any further updates. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave it below, or contact us on our community forum at community.jamaicans.dev. See you soon.
Let's see if I'm going to see the date. All right, so you see here where it says last updated. This is very important, because then this helps you to understand, is this a high risk plugin? I'm trying to find one that is just really old, hoping to find one that hasn't been updated in years. Okay, so it's not giving me the option to choose plugins based on the last date when it was last updated. So like this, 1 year ago, right? This is likely a plugin that has some security vulnerabilities. Depending on how popular it is, if it's really popular, then it's likely that it has lots of vulnerabilities that which have been discovered. If it's not so popular, then it's likely that not a lot of websites are using it, which also makes it not really enticing for someone who is trying to hack a website to spend the time to invest in this plugin that's being used on just 700 WordPress sites. They go after the plugins which are really popular, the ones which are on millions of sites, because that means if they detect that the plugin is vulnerable, then the amount of sites that they could compromise are a lot. So it's a cost benefit type of thing, and that's one of the reasons why operating systems like Mac, people used to think that it didn't have antivirus, it didn't have malware, and it couldn't be hacked and couldn't get a virus and all of that, because the quantity of Windows systems was just so large that very few security researchers and hackers and all of that, they weren't really focusing a lot on Mac, because if they discovered a vulnerability, it really just affected a small quantity of computers compared to Windows systems, where it would be a large scale hack that they could now execute versus just a few relatively small number of Mac users. That's really what caused that whole misconception. Mac does have malware and stuff out there for it, but it just wasn't very feasible for a lot of people or hackers to invest their time into trying to exploit Mac, because when they do the general like, let's say, send out malware to the general public, it is highly likely that 80% of the persons who would be clicking on these suspicious links or downloading software, they were likely to have Windows. So it just made more sense to create Windows exploits, because of the probability was just so high that it's much more likely that the person has Windows and would get compromised, as opposed to creating it for the minority of users. So yeah, that's just a little background there.
Yeah. All right, so there are two questions here. The first one is, how often should you update your WordPress themes and plugins? And is it safe to update regularly?
Every day. Every day. So right now, WordPress has a thing now. I don't remember how long now they started it, but they started to give an option to enable auto updates.
Maybe a year.
Yeah, so they didn't used to have that, and so you would usually have to get some third-party service that does the auto updates. So I think for here, see, enable auto updates. So I haven't enabled it because I just created this site today and we'll be deleting it. But now you can enable auto updates, so it will handle that for you.
But the other concern here was if it won't mess up the site, because sometimes you have some plugin themes that are not compatible with a plugin or WordPress. So person was asking if it would mess up the site.
So this is where the additional important thing comes in of having backups. So the benefit I have with managed WordPress hosting is that the hosting provider provides backups for 30 days. So if for some reason I visit one of my sites and realize that the site is down, then I can always just roll back the site to a day or so before when the site was working normally, and then I can investigate to see why the site is broken. I think WordPress has come a far way, where that used to be something that was sort of common, but now sites don't really break now because of a plugin update. I don't really have that. I don't see it much. It used to be like years ago, but I don't really see it.
Well, based on my experience, I normally update the plugins first and the themes before I update WordPress core, because sometimes the plugins are updated based on the changes that WordPress make. So as a core is updated, WordPress core is updated, then the plugins are normally the next thing to be updated. So you do the plugins first, then the core.
Yes, so usually you would have to do that when you're managing your own WordPress, like you have a Linux server and then you have WordPress installed on that. But what I did is to just use managed WordPress, so that GoDaddy actually handles the updates for the WordPress core automatically, and then for the plugins I just enable the feature to say enable auto updates. So all of that is on autopilot for me to do the updates. Now, additionally, in addition to that, I use what's it called? Fresh Ping. I use FreshPing to monitor uptime. So FreshPing is it's one of those common service where it pings your website, at just intervals like every 5 minutes, and if it doesn't receive a response, it sends an alert to you to say your site is down. So if for some reason, whatever reason it is, my site is down, let's say the site gets hacked, or something is causing the site to not work, maybe it's a GoDaddy issue, or maybe hosting provider issue, I host with GoDaddy, or maybe it's just a plugin caused the site to stop working because something auto update, I would automatically get a notification, an email notification that the site is down. Then I can go and check and investigate to see why that is happening. And this is a free service, right? At least for there are, with most services there's a free tier. So this is free for about 50 domains. So as you see, from just all of the different things, the security is about having layers of protection. So so I have security in place, and I'm telling you about security to prevent the issue from happening. But if you do have some type of issue, then you have the reactive part of security now, which would notify you that something strange happened, such as the notifications from the plugin, the downtime alerts from some third-party service that is pinging your site every 1 minute or every 5 minutes or 10 minutes, whatever intervals you think are good, so that you would know about downtime before the general public or just your users, and then you can fix it before people start to scream and say, your site is down, etc., etc. Yeah, so all in all, it's about, in terms of key takeaways, we could go on more about WordPress and such, but
I think they have a few questions here. Alicia had a question about what's the next step after you getting the red flag that your site was hacked.
Well, it's not that you would know that the site was hacked unless you investigate. So you have to investigate. You would get some type of sign that something strange is happening, and then you investigate to see if it was actually hacked. So but once you investigate and you confirm that, well, your site was compromised, based on the nature of that, then you need to get help. It's likely that you might not be a professional in that area, so that's where you reach out to other people like moi, so you contact a company that does that type of thing, or that can guide you in that area, and they can instruct you. Otherwise, you could try to do it yourself. So you can say, okay, your WordPress website is hacked. You do a Google search. My WordPress site was hacked, what to do now? And you get a lot of different tips, like roll back from a previous backup. So restore from a previous backup. You might get tips of use a plugin to scan for malware. There's one very good plugin that I know of called Malcare, right? And it's very, very good in terms of to identify malware and remove it from a WordPress site. It scans all of the files, it scans the database, but it's $99 US per year, right? So, but it's very, very good. Like, I've used it already. It's very, very good. I've used it for clients. So none of my sites have ever been hacked so far, yeah. But yeah, I've used it to support a client, and it does a good job. It removes the files without breaking the site, and it's very good. So you can try to do it yourself, but usually if that's not your primary area of expertise, then I'd suggest that you reach out to someone who that is their area, whether it's a company or a person that reach out to them so that they can help, and try to be proactive about all of that, about protecting your site. Because what I've seen is that I'll make suggestions to people and say, hey, you should do this, you should do that for your site, just like what I'm doing now. And it might sound like it is hypothetical, or it's just so-called good to do. But then when their site is hacked, right, and their site goes down, people start to scramble, because now it's real, and they have downtime. Their business site is down, customers can't go. Then people start to post pictures on social media of their site being hacked, and it now becomes a whole frenzy where like for the Malcare plugin that cost 99 US per year, that was out of their budget, but when their site is hacked, they are willing to spend 10 times that to get their site back to normal, when they could have spent just 10% of whatever they're willing to spend now to just do it on a continuous basis to keep things safe. So I'm just using that to emphasize that although it sounds hypothetical that you should implement security and you should do all of these different things to protect your WordPress site, it is a lot better to prevent the vulnerabilities from happening, and it's a lot cheaper than to deal with the cleanup afterwards, because the cleanup can take a lot of time for you to figure out what exactly went wrong, to try and fix it, to restore confidence in the people who wanted to use your site. So it could be that your site takes payments, you're using WooCommerce, and people no longer trust your site, so now you're losing money. Yeah, you fixed your site, but now they're saying, well, your site got hacked. They don't want to lose their credit card info, so they're not going to pay money through your site. So it's oftentimes just a lot cheaper to be proactive, implement the different security controls from before, and kind of just stay on top of security, because afterwards it can just cost you a whole lot more money.
All right, anybody have any questions that you might?
I think I'll just cut off there in terms of the demos and such.
Final question.
So it's quite a bit. I know it's probably a lot for you to soak up, but at least you can see that from a practical perspective, what are some of the things you can do.
Any final thoughts? Anybody have any questions?
Well,
I have a.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Who's that?
I have a question, Gavin. Can you hear me properly?
Yeah, man.
Yeah, I can.
Okay. I was asking, when you did the Calimnox scan, the WP scan, and you found that file. Was it the robot.txt file? I think.
Yeah.
And now that you were showing us the hidden the hidden login page, was that one of the stuff that you said that would have been stored? Some persons would store in that file.
Sometimes they do, because they don't want the search engines to crawl their login page and have it in the search results. They think that it's a good solution to put it in the robots.txt, right? But there are other ways to do that, but sometimes it ends up there because people manually put it there as a way to keep it out of search engines. So there are different ways to handle that problem, and using the robots.txt for pages like the login page isn't usually a good angle to achieve that.
Okay. And where do you find that file though on WordPress?
Okay, so it's the name of the site, then you go /robots.txt.
Okay.
So right now, if you go to this file and you see here, you see something that says wp-login.php, it's not a big deal, right? Because that's the default location of the login page that the entire world knows that is, and that it is standard for WordPress sites. But if you change that default login URL to something else, then do not put it there, because then you're telling the world where your private URL is to get to your login page. So right now, if robots.txt is here, but you have that hide URL thing enabled, then it won't help them, because they still can't get to the login page. So so it's just something to think about.
Okay, thank you.
I think somebody else wanted. Shane?
Yeah, I was wondering if Gavin want me to get in on some of the action and just show some of the stuff that he was talking about, like Cloudflare demo, what it look like, and
Yeah,
how
if
it helps.
sure. Yes, I
Right.
have a Cloudflare. You can show it, and I'm just sharing to show the websites for Cloudflare and for Security, so people can eventually, jump to them afterwards. But yeah,
And
yeah,
I'll go ahead and share my
Yeah, do it
screen.
quickly
sure.
because we don't want to overload everybody with information.
Okay, so
Yeah.
firstly, so while Gavin was talking, I was actually inspecting everything that he was doing. For example, starting with the SSL. Gavin has a grade A SSL certificate, meaning the encryption is good. He's using the right SSL levels. So there's a website called SSL Labs, which you can just put your domain name in, and it will basically show you a breakdown whether your site is protected just by having a SSL certificate when it comes to encryption. But of course, it will tell you if you need a better SSL certificate. For example, there's 1 and 2 things with Gavin site,
The
which
demo
of
site,
course a new site, so you
the
wouldn't.
demo site, yeah,
Yeah. So for example, there's TSL
TLS,
and 0.
TLS, yeah,
Yeah. Those are not enabled, which is good because those are deprecated protocols for SSL, which would cause like hackers would basically use that for excessive attacks, injection, and so forth. So this is one tool that you can use to just check your SSL certificate if it's valid, if it's a quality good SSL certificate. Another thing that Gavin mentioned was Cloudflare or a Web Firewall. And I'll show you basically my dashboard of Cloudflare for JamaicanDevelopers.com. So today, within the last 24 hours, apparently there were 7 attacks. There has been a number of traffic in the last 24 hours, and it shows where those attacks were from. Some were from Russia. If you scroll down, it will show you some from Russia, Singapore, Kenya, and so forth. So, and then it will report, okay, how much of those attacks were blocked by Cloudflare or that web security. So those same attacks that came in basically were blocked. So you might have a terminology called DDoS attack, which is denial of service. So Cloudflare, along with a lot of other web security tools, helps to prevent DDoS attack if they notice like there's like a flood amount of traffic just spontaneously attacking the site from a particular region or a particular set of IP address. So it will automatically block those type of traffic going to your website to ensure that your site continue to move smoothly, and a DDoS attack with the load amount of traffic don't slow down your website. Of course, it will show you like the performance of your website, how good it is, and so forth, as well as when it comes on to SSL, as mentioned by Gavin, it offers a good amount of encryption, as well as it Cloudflare, you can always enable SSL. So you might notice like Observer website, if you go to observer.com without putting the HTTPS, you might get an HTTP site which is insecure. So Cloudflare can automatically rewrite all of the traffic and the requests to your server with SSL encryption. And what it does, it also provides dual encryption from the client level as well as the server level. So it gives you a lot of out of the box security features that is practically free, because you can sign up for free. All you need to do is point your domain name server, and you can always look up that and find out more about it. And it will give you step by step how to set it up. It's a very easy process. It's free, and you can just use it as one of those basic tools to help secure your website.
Ocean, I'm thinking that one day we could probably do a session where we show people how to actually do the DNS change and add the Web Firewall to the WordPress site. I think that might be a session. Yeah.
Yes, I actually had planned to do it in this session. That's why
okay.
Yeah.
I realized that you were taking off a chunk some, but I came late, so another day we can do that as you mentioned.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to show you, which was one of the first thing that Gavin spoke about, the plugins. But what Gavin did is he went in Kali Linux or source code. There's actual website that you can use, for example, BuiltWith, which you can put in like the URL of the site, and it will give you a detailed profile of the site, what they're using, the plugins that they're using, if the plugin is outdated, updated, and it gives you all sort of technology that they're using. So this can give you a quick profile summary of a website. For example, TechCrunch, no pun intended. So like, if you scroll, you see a lot of technology that is on TechCrunch WordPress website, quite a lot, a long list. So this will give you a detailed profile of it. So if you're not familiar with Kali Linux or just inspect element, look at the source code, you can go on BuiltWith to get a profile. And this site also can help you to pinpoint security issues on your site as well. The other thing that I want to touch base on, which is another tool, I don't remember which tool you mentioned, Gavin, for uptime.
Ping, no, not uptime. Fresh ping.
Okay, fresh ping. All right, so for like most of what I wanted to talk about, Gavin went into detail about it. So I'm just showing you some examples. So I personally use uptime, but uptime allows you, I don't know if fresh ping does this, but uptime allows you have a status page of all of your subdomain or domain. So for example, this is like everything that I'm hosting on Jamaican developers, and it will show you when it's done, the percentage that it was up, and so forth. So once it goes down, it can send you an email, Telegram message, SMS message, or a Slack message. So all of that you can just set up, build it around your infrastructure, and help you to ensure that even when your site goes down, you're notified, and you can do any form of maintenance check, back, restore, and so forth. So those are 3 things that I wanted to touch on. There's one more, but I don't want to overload everyone. So yeah, I hope it's pretty fast run through of all of it. If there's any question, you can just go ahead and ask.
I think they're a little overwhelmed. But we can just wrap up right now because we're very close to 8 o'clock. We're doing announcements for our next meeting. It's April 8th. I have that right? The second Thursday of next month, April 8th, 6 p.m. And you'll see updated information in the meetup site, the meetup page, where you'll know about the speakers and the topic that we're going to discuss. O'Shane, Latif, I have any other announcements? Or Ron?
Well, the recording will be published on the JAD YouTube page. So we'll let everyone know once that is published. And in the chat, I think a while back I posted the link to Gavin's Cybersecurity support group, the Discord link, as well as the link to join the WordPress Slack group. I'm going to post them in the chat again.
Okay.
Mhm.
Also, there's a Slack group, as Latifa mentioned. Yes, she can post it. She will post it in the chat, and we'll also post it on the Meetup page. So if you're interested in anything related to WordPress, you can just join the Slack group, and we, continue conversation from there.
Okay, and if you have any topics that you would like us to discuss, you can share it with us in the group. Join the group and share any topics or any speakers that you would like to hear from. We can try to reach out to them. So anything else?
All right. One last announcement. Just in case there are students in the group, I must say, Google Summer of Code is open, and it's available for students to do Google Summer of Code. It's a summer internship. We get to work on open source technology. I haven't checked on the list of organization. If WordPress is a part of the open source organization for Google Summer of Code, you can get to contribute to WordPress and be able to, learn, earn, and contribute to open source technology. So for any information about Google Summer of Code, if you're a student, you can check out community.jamaicans.dev, or I'll post it in the WordPress community group. With that said, that's everything from my side.
Gavin, I want to thank you for joining us and sharing all of that information. I know it's very late for you. You're probably into Friday already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was good, So thanks for inviting me. I'm glad I could share with the community.
Yeah. So if you have any other topics that you'd like to discuss, or you have any team members that would like to share anything, you can reach out to me, of course.
Sure.
We can schedule everything. But thanks again, everybody, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the session, and we look for the next meeting, April 8th, in next month. Yeah. So see you guys. Thanks for coming. And
Hey, we've reached the end of this video, and I just have to say thank you so much for watching. I know these videos can get pretty long, but I do hope it was informative, fun, and insightful. If you like this video, don't forget to click subscribe and hit the notifications bell in the description below. Once again, thank you for watching. See you in the next video, and blessings from the Jamaican Developers team.